Hey everyone, welcome back to the Chris Camaro channel. Today we're going to be doing another repair video, and it's going to be on a car that I've done many other repairs on in the past. It's the 2003 Grand Prix GT. And this time, when you try to start the car, it'll fire up, but then it'll stumble and die almost immediately. So that's the symptom. And if you've had this problem before, it's not immediately apparent what the problem is. Let me first start off by demonstrating the problem so that you can see what the symptoms are. I'm going to demonstrate what happens before you fix the problem. It didn't die as quickly as I thought it would, but let me try again and see if I can get a better example for you. So once again, okay, so you see how it just stumbles and dies, right? And if you try to use the gas pedal to keep it alive, it won't really work. It'll just sort of prolong the process a little bit, but it's not really going to keep the car on. Let's see if I can show you that. As you can see, I was unable to keep the car running, even though it starts up just fine every time. It just won't stay on, and it'll just conk out and die. Now, if the problem was electrical, it could be one of two things. It could be either the battery or the alternator. If it's the battery, you should be able to keep the car running just by pushing the accelerator pedal, because as long as the RPMs are high enough and the alternator is producing 14 volts or whatever, the car will run just fine. So one indication that it's not the battery is that you can't keep the car on by pushing the accelerator. If it was the alternator that was gone, then the battery would keep the car on for a while, but then the voltage on the battery would eventually get low, and then the car would shut itself off just because of not enough voltage, and then it would refuse to start after that, just because of a dead battery. So those are different scenarios, and you can tell the difference because this isn't like that. This is a situation where you can repeatedly start the car every time, infinite number of times. You can keep starting it over and over again. It'll start every time because the alternator's working and it's recharging the battery, but it just won't stay on. And that's because the mass airflow sensor is responsible for telling the engine how much gas to add to the air that's coming in. And if it's not working properly, it's not providing the correct amount of gas, the mixture's off, and the car just, the combustion process just it won't work. So it'll just misfire, or it'll be too rich, too lean, whatever, and it just won't be able to sustain a combustion reaction, right? So it'll just shut off and die. The reason it starts is because when it starts, there's a lookup table that's responsible for that has nothing to do with the sensor. It's just sort of pre-programmed, so it'll start every time, but as soon as it switches over to, okay, I've started the car, now I'm reading the sensor for the remainder of the car's running time. As soon as it switches over to the sensor's no good, it's reporting bad data, and it won't work. Before we get to the repair, what can you do about this when it happens, right? Because as soon as you notice this problem, it's going to be at an inconvenient time. Maybe you're late for work or something like this, and you need to fix the problem immediately because you can't afford to wait for Amazon or eBay to ship you a replacement part. That'll take days. So you need to fix the car like ASAP, right? So it's really, really easy to fix this problem. Just disconnect the sensor. And that may seem counterintuitive, like why disconnecting the sensor would make it better than having a busted sensor. But the thing is about these cars, the way they work, is that if the sensor's plugged in, the car assumes that that it needs to read it. You know, it needs to rely on the sensor's input. If you disconnect it, it'll just disregard it altogether. And it has backup tables in the computer that it can fall back on if the sensor's not available. However, as long as it's plugged in, it will assume that it needs to read that sensor, and the bad data that it's getting is just not going to allow the car to run. So disconnecting this altogether will be like, okay, this thing doesn't exist. Now I'm going to rely on this intake air temperature sensor, that manifold pressure sensor, and the RPMs, and through a combination of those three sensors, I'm going to use some pre-programmed lookup tables in the computer to figure out how much fuel I need for the engine. And this is programmed from the factory to be like very safe, ultra rich, but definitely functional. So the car will run, it'll run like crap, it'll get terrible fuel economy, but it will work and it will get you from A to B, and it won't leave you stranded on the side of the road. The replacement part that you need is AFM 50M-05. You can see it right there, that's the part number. So you look that up, you can get a pretty cheap generic replacement that looks like this. This one here costs me about $25, and it's the same thing. It's just a generic, you know, unbranded version, but parts compatible. So to get this off is really simple. There's only 2 screws holding it on, and you just drop this one in place and you screw it back in there and you're good to go. The only problem is, take a look at these screws. Okay, these screws are Torx. I don't know what size they are, or didn't bother to check, but they've got these little steel buttons inside the profile that prevents you from fitting your Torx tool in there. This is like a security feature. For some reason they don't want you touching this. I guess they only want certified mechanics touching it. So you'd need to buy a special Torx tool with a hole in the middle in order to fit in there and to actually get that off. So the easiest way to deal with this is just to use vice grips. You can try needle nose pliers, but 99% of the time the reason these things are failing is simply because they're old. Old cars, old sensors, they burn out, they get gummed up. And you know how old cars are. The fasteners are always seized in place because that's just the nature of old vehicles. Everything's always seized in place. So you're not going to likely have much luck using needle nose to get that off. But if you use vice grips, it's really not a problem. Or at least it's a problem that's not too bad to deal with. You just have to sort of work the fastener around. If it's seized, you just sort of grip it real tight. You have to adjust the vice grips until you can clamp onto it real tight there, and then just work it until it comes off. And then pull the sensor off. Okay, be very careful you don't get crap in the throttle body and all that. So, oh, look at that. That's interesting. So if you take a look, there's it's called a hot wire device, because basically the way it works is you put a voltage across this wire, it makes it hot, and then the incoming air cools it off. And in order for the wire to maintain a constant temperature, it has to change the voltage, increase the voltage to compensate for the cooling effect of the air passing by. So the fluctuation in the voltage is recorded by the computer, and that's how it determines you know, how much airflow you're getting. But you can see the gunk on the wire, and that's probably what's causing the problem. I don't know if cleaning this would actually salvage this sensor or not, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to play it safe and use a brand new part. But yeah, this is it could either be dirty, or it could just be that the heating cycles over and over again over the years has just burnt the element out. So either way, we're going to chuck that in the garbage, and we're going to replace it with a new unit. And here's the new unit. like I said, it's parts compatible, but otherwise just sort of a generic looking unbranded thing. And you can see that this one here has a nice clean wire in it. So we're going to drop that in. Okay, and as expected, the holes line up perfectly, but then I'll show you how it works with the new sensor. So really, the only way that it doesn't work is with a bad sensor plugged in. It'll pretty much work in any other condition, but if you want, you know, the car to run well, if you want it to run in a nice tuned, you know, good running condition with good mileage, and you don't have like too much fuel ruining your catalytic converter and gumming up your cylinder walls and all this, and your spark plug. If you don't want all of that, then obviously you're going to want to replace the sensor and plug it back in. So it's not enough to run around without it. So that's finger tight now. You can go ahead and use either needle nose or vice grips to finish the job. So after all that, it's secure in place now. As I said, because I forgot to do this earlier, I'm just going to demonstrate really quickly how the car will run without the sensor plugged in. So as you can clearly see, it's not connected, and I'm just going to show you that the car will run anyway. Okay, so now that I've demonstrated that the car will run without the sensor connected, now we're actually going to plug the new one in and run it with that. Just an advisory. The first time that you run this with the new sensor, don't think that it didn't work because it stumbles on you. Basically, the car has its own self-learning capacity, so it'll kind of adjust itself and learn based on how the fuel ratio is. So when the sensor's broken and reporting the fuel ratio incorrectly, the car will sort of try to learn that. So when you plug the new sensor in, and the new sensor of course works perfectly, the computer will be off because it'll have adapted to the old malfunctioning sensor. So the first time you start the car, it will behave erratically, like it's going to fail again. It may even stall. It's possible. But that doesn't mean that your repair didn't work. You just have to fire it up a couple times and possibly hit the gas a little bit just to keep it from dying on you, and then just wait and it will correct itself. And I'll show you how that works just now. So finally, now that everything's installed, we're going to fire up the car for the first time with the new sensor, and hopefully it doesn't die or anything, but if it does, don't worry about it. We'll just try a couple times and eventually it should even out. Okay, so that's not too bad. It was a little bit rough at the very beginning there, but it's evened itself out already. It's already running smoothly, and at this point you shouldn't have any problems. Okay, great. So that wraps up another repair video for the Chris Camaro channel. Please, as always, like, subscribe, comment, and you know, we're all going through hard times these days, and I try my best to help you guys out and provide these videos. So to keep me going, please consider giving the bare minimum and the super thanks if you can, and that'd be much appreciated. I always like reading success stories in the comments, and you know, doing my best to contribute to the automotive community, and trying to keep your old cars on the road. So thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you again soon.